Al-Kindi, the first philosopher of Islam. Abu Yusuf Yaqub ibn Ishaq al-Sabah al-Kindi, a name that reverberates through the annals of intellectual history, is rightfully celebrated as the philosopher of the Arabs. His emergence in the 9th century Baghdad during the flourishing era of the Abbasid Caliphate was a watershed moment that gave birth to a distinct and enduring tradition of Islamic philosophy. Prior to Al-Kindi, Muslim scholars were primarily focused on the religious sciences of jurisprudence, fiqh, prophetic traditions, hadith, and Quranic exegesis, tafsir. While these fields were robust and intellectually rich, a systematic engagement with the philosophical inheritance of the Greco-Roman world was largely absent. Al-Kindi changed this forever. He was a pioneering figure who not only introduced Greek philosophical concepts into the Islamic world, but also demonstrated their profound utility in understanding and defending the principles of Islam. Al-Kindi's life coincided with the reign of the Abbasid caliphs Al-Ma'mun and Al-Mu'tasim, who were great patrons of learning and supported the House of Wisdom, Beit al-Hikmah, a major intellectual center in Baghdad. This environment of state-sponsored scholarship was crucial for Al-Kindi's work. He saw no inherent contradiction between faith and reason. On the contrary, he believed that philosophy was the most noble of human pursuits, second only to prophecy. For him, philosophy was the quest for truth. And since all truth ultimately emanates from God, philosophy was a means of attaining a deeper knowledge of the divine. This conviction allowed him to frame philosophical inquiry not as a foreign or dangerous pursuit, but as a legitimate and essential Islamic discipline. His work was not a mere imitation of Greek thought. It was a critical and creative synthesis that integrated Aristotelian logic, Neoplatonic mathematics, and Euclidean mathematics with the core monotheistic principles of Islam. By doing so, Al-Kindi laid the intellectual groundwork for a philosophical tradition that would be carried forward and expanded upon by giants like Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, Avicenna, and Ibn Rushd, Averroes, who would all stand on the shoulders of this foundational thinker. Bridging Greek thought and Islamic wisdom. Al-Kindi's most profound and lasting contribution was his role as the great intellectual bridge between the ancient Hellenistic world and the burgeoning Islamic civilization. This monumental task was accomplished primarily through his deep involvement in the translation movement, a concerted effort during the Abbasid Caliphate to translate ancient scientific and philosophical texts into Arabic. The movement was a catalyst for a 1,000-year-long golden age of Islamic scholarship, and Al-Kindi was at its heart. He was more than a translator. He was a master reviser, editor, and commentator who critically engaged with the texts he and his team brought into Arabic. His work spanned a vast array of Greek thinkers. He and his circle translated and commented on the works of Aristotle, particularly his logical treatises and metaphysical works, and the profound mystical and ethical writings of the Neoplatonists. He also engaged with the mathematical and astronomical works of Euclid and Ptolemy. Al-Kindi didn't simply render these texts word for word. He reinterpreted them within an Islamic context, demonstrating that the rigorous logic of Aristotle could be used to structure theological arguments, and that the hierarchical cosmology of Neoplatonism could be adapted to explain the creation of the world from a single, transcendent God. For example, he used philosophical arguments to establish the oneness of God and to argue against the eternity of the world, a point of contention with some Greek philosophers. His genius lay in his ability to show that Greek philosophy was not just a historical curiosity, but a living, breathing tool that could enrich and strengthen Islamic life. His efforts fundamentally transformed the intellectual landscape, proving that Islamic wisdom could not only absorb the knowledge of previous civilizations, but could also refine, correct, and build upon it to create a new, vibrant intellectual tradition. Al-Kindi's philosophy of the soul. The nature and fate of the soul was one of the central concerns of Al-Kindi's philosophical project. His theory was a masterful synthesis of various philosophical schools, primarily Neoplatonism and Aristotelian thought, all reconciled with the Islamic understanding of the soul. He conceived of the soul as a spiritual, incorporeal, and simple substance, meaning it has no parts and cannot be divided. It is distinct from the physical body, which is composed of matter and is subject to change and decay. According to Al-Kindi, the soul's origin is divine, coming from the world of the intellect, and its ultimate destiny is to return to its spiritual source after its temporary journey on earth. Al-Kindi distinguished between the animal soul, which is responsible for passions, desires, and bodily functions, and the rational soul, which is the seat of intellect, reason, and moral consciousness. The rational soul's purpose is to seek knowledge and to purify itself from the corrupting influence of the physical world. He believed that the human intellect has the potential to grasp universal, intelligible forms, and that the highest form of human happiness is to contemplate these divine truths. To achieve this, the rational soul must exert control over the animal soul, which is often swayed by worldly pleasures and fleeting sensations. Al-Kindi prescribed a life of philosophical contemplation, ethical discipline, and intellectual pursuit as the means to achieve this purification. The study of mathematics and metaphysics, in particular, was seen as a key to training the rational soul to think abstractly and to prepare it for its ultimate reunion with the divine intellect. For Al-Kindi, the health of the soul was a matter of intellectual and moral discipline, and this concept had profound implications for his ethical and theological writings. Mathematics, medicine, metaphysics, the world of Al-Kindi. Al-Kindi was a quintessential polymath, a figure whose intellectual curiosity knew no bounds. His vast body of work, estimated to be over 260 treatises, spanned an incredible range of disciplines, a testament to the integrated nature of knowledge during the Islamic Golden Age. He believed that all fields of knowledge were interconnected, and that a deep understanding in one area could illuminate others. In mathematics, Al-Kindi was a pioneer. He wrote extensively on geometry, number theory, and arithmetic, and was instrumental in introducing the use of Indian numerals to the Islamic world. His works, though many are now lost, were foundational for later mathematicians. His work in optics was particularly revolutionary. He challenged the ancient Greek theory of vision, which held that rays emanated from the eye to perceive objects. Instead, he proposed that light rays traveled from the object to the eye. His research on the nature of light and reflection laid the foundation for the more famous work of Ibn al-Haytham. In medicine, Al-Kindi was a practicing physician who applied mathematical principles to pharmacology. He developed a system for quantifying the strength of drugs and their effects on the body, a pioneering step toward a more systematic and scientific approach to medicine. In metaphysics, he grappled with fundamental questions about reality, creation, and the nature of God. He used logical arguments to defend monotheism, arguing that the universe must have a single, uncaused cause. He also explored the concepts of causality, time, and space, offering a unique blend of Aristotelian and Neoplatonic perspectives. Al-Kindi's work across these diverse fields was not a series of isolated projects, but a single, unified quest to understand the underlying principles of a universe created by a rational and benevolent God. Rational faith, Al-Kindi's theological insights. Al-Kindi's approach to theology was defined by his unwavering belief in the harmony of faith and reason. He was a devout Muslim who saw philosophy not as a rival to religious truth, but as its most powerful ally. In his view, both prophecy and philosophy were pathways to the same ultimate truth, the knowledge of God. Prophecy, he argued, delivered this truth to humanity directly and in an accessible form, while philosophy allowed the human intellect to arrive at it through rigorous logical inquiry. He used philosophical methods to address and defend core Islamic doctrines. For example, he employed a teleological argument for the existence of God, reasoning that the order, beauty, and purposefulness of the universe could only be explained by the existence of a single, omnipotent creator. He also used a cosmological argument, asserting that every effect must have a cause, and tracing this chain of causation back to a first cause, God, who is himself uncaused. This rational approach was crucial in an era of theological debate and emerging heresies. Al-Kindi's work provided a powerful intellectual framework for Orthodox Islam, offering reasoned answers to complex questions about the nature of God, the created world, and the relationship between the divine and the human. He believed that the truths revealed in the Quran and the Hadith were fully compatible with the truths discovered through rational inquiry, and that a Muslim's faith could be strengthened and deepened through philosophical contemplation. He saw the philosopher as the ultimate servant of God, using the divine gift of reason to know and understand the divine reality. Al-Kindi and the translation movement. The translation movement was the cornerstone of the Islamic Golden Age, and Al-Kindi's role within it was monumental. Located in Baghdad, the House of Wisdom, Beit al-Hikmah, was the epicenter of this ambitious project, which saw the systematic translation of ancient texts from Greek, Syriac, Pahlavi, and Sanskrit into Arabic. Al-Kindi was a leading intellectual figure of this movement, not just as a consumer of these translations, but as a guiding force. He supervised and commissioned translations of a vast number of works, including the complete works of Aristotle and the writings of Plato and other Neoplatonists. He also oversaw the translation of key mathematical, medical, and astronomical texts. What made his involvement so crucial was his dual role as both a scholar and a patron.
He was able to direct translators, correct their work, and most importantly, provide the intellectual framework for interpreting these new ideas. He recognized that simply translating a text was not enough. The concepts had to be contextualized and made relevant to an Arabic-speaking audience with a different religious and cultural background. Al-Kindi's commentaries and summaries of these works were essential for making complex philosophical ideas, such as Aristotle's logic and metaphysics, accessible and intelligible. He created the very terminology in Arabic to discuss these abstract concepts, effectively building a new philosophical vocabulary. His contributions ensured that the translation movement was not a mere transfer of knowledge, but a creative, intellectual fusion that laid the foundation for centuries of original Islamic scholarship.
The Philosopher of Baghdad. The Philosopher of Baghdad, Al-Kindi's moniker as the Philosopher of Baghdad, is a title earned through his intellectual dominance and profound influence in the Abbasid capital. Born into an aristocratic family with deep roots in the Arab tribe of Kinda, he enjoyed the patronage of several powerful caliphs, most notably Al-Mamun and Al-Mutasim. This support gave him the freedom and resources to pursue his scholarly interests without constraint. Baghdad at the time was a vibrant, cosmopolitan city, a melting pot of cultures, religions, and ideas. Its libraries, academies, and salons were filled with scholars from diverse backgrounds, and intellectual debate was a cherished pastime. Al-Kindi was at the very center of this intellectual ferment. He was not a reclusive academic. He was a public intellectual, a court physician, and a respected teacher. He engaged in intellectual debates with theologians and scholars of other schools of thought. His work reflects the diverse influences present in Baghdad, as he drew not only on Greek thought, but also on Persian and Indian knowledge, filtering everything through the lens of Islamic monotheism. His legacy as the Philosopher of Baghdad is not just a geographical distinction. It speaks to his status as the leading intellectual figure of his time, a scholar whose work was the very embodiment of the city's intellectual vitality and its commitment to the pursuit of knowledge. He was the figure who gave the Islamic world its first true philosophical voice. Knowledge and certainty in Al-Kindi's epistemology. Al-Kindi's theory of knowledge, or epistemology, was built on a deep-seated desire to achieve certainty. He believed that human beings were capable of attaining true knowledge, a knowledge that transcended mere opinion and conjecture. He identified two primary sources of knowledge, the senses and the intellect. Sensory experience, while necessary for understanding the physical world, was inherently unreliable. Our senses can be deceived, and the information they provide is specific, fleeting, and constantly changing. True knowledge, according to Al-Kindi, could only be found through the intellect, which has the capacity to grasp universal, unchanging truths. He outlined a hierarchy of knowledge, from basic sensory data to the highest level of intellectual certainty. The highest form of knowledge, he argued, was not empirical, but rational, achieved through logical demonstration and the contemplation of abstract forms.
He was a firm believer in the power of Aristotelian logic as a tool for ensuring the soundness of an argument and from premises to certain conclusions. For Al-Kindi, the ultimate goal of philosophical inquiry was to acquire knowledge of the uncreated reality, God, and of the universal principles that govern the cosmos. This intellectual pursuit was not just a cognitive exercise, it was a path of moral and spiritual purification. By training the intellect to focus on unchanging truths and to free itself from the distractions of the physical world, the human being could achieve a state of spiritual clarity and attain the highest form of human happiness.
Al-Kindi versus skepticism. Reason as revelation. The intellectual milieu of the 9th century was not without its challenges. Philosophers like Al-Kindi faced opposition from both dogmatic theologians who viewed philosophy as a threat to faith, and from skeptics who questioned the very possibility of certain knowledge. Al-Kindi was a fierce and articulate defender of reason. He viewed skepticism not as a legitimate philosophical position, but as an intellectual disease that would lead to moral and spiritual decay. He argued that to doubt the certainty of knowledge was to doubt the very order of the universe and the rationality of its creator. Al-Kindi's rebuttal to skepticism was multifaceted. He pointed to the predictability of the natural world, the unshakable certainty of mathematics, and the logical structure of thought itself as irrefutable evidence that reason was a reliable guide to truth. He argued that the human intellect was not a product of blind chance, but a divine gift, and that to use it to its fullest was to honor God. For him, reason was a form of revelation, a way that God revealed His truth to humanity. While prophetic revelation provided truths directly, philosophical inquiry provided a means for humanity to discover those same truths through its own rational faculties. Al-Kindi believed that a faith supported by reason was a superior and more enduring faith than one based on blind acceptance. His robust defense of reason laid the groundwork for a tradition of rational inquiry that would flourish in the Islamic world and ultimately influence the development of European scholasticism. Al-Kindi's legacy in modern science. While Al-Kindi's philosophical contributions are his most famous, his legacy extends far into the foundations of modern science. He was a scientist who champions the use of mathematics and empirical observation as tools for understanding the natural world, an approach that is now central to the scientific method. His work in optics was a major turning point. By challenging the Greek theory that vision was an active process of the eye sending out rays, he proposed a model where light rays travel from the object to the eye. His research on the properties of light, including refraction and reflection, laid the theoretical groundwork for the monumental work of Ibn al-Haytham, who is often credited as the father of modern optics. In cryptography, Al-Kindi wrote the earliest known treatise on code breaking, a work that detailed methods like frequency analysis. This technique, which relies on the fact that certain letters or characters appear more frequently than others in a given language, is a foundational concept in cryptanalysis and is still used today. Furthermore, his application of mathematical principles to medicine and his pharmacological works were early steps toward a more quantitative and systematic approach to healthcare. Al-Kindi's enduring legacy is not just in the specific discoveries he made, but in his fundamental belief that the universe is governed by rational, predictable laws that can be understood through human reason and observation. This conviction, which he helped to solidify within the Islamic intellectual tradition, was one of the key factors that led to the scientific revolution centuries later.